It's 4 p.m. and we're bringing you the developing news.
And the stories behind the headlines. This is Storycon.
It's a Wednesday, March 6, and here are the headlines for today. President Bongbong Marcos says government continues to view China's aggression in the West Philippine Sea with, and we quote, great alarm. He also says that the country will file a protest against Beijing's recent provocations in the disputed waters. In an earlier interview with ABC News Australia, the president says government strategy is to, and we quote, ease up on the rhetoric.
The government has summoned China's chief of mission in Manila following Beijing's aggressive actions in the West Philippine Sea. Just yesterday, Chinese vessels made dangerous maneuvers and fired water cannon at Philippine vessels conducting a resupply mission to Ayungin Shoal. The international community has condemned Beijing's action. And former First Lady Imelda Marcos is still in the hospital for suspected pneumonia. President Bongbong Marcos said his mother has already been given antibiotics. The chief executive is confident the former First Lady will recover soon.
And joining us now on Zoom or via Zoom is Ana Marie Pamintuan, the editor-chief of the Philippine Star. And in the studio, we have, of course, Tito Ronald Llamas, the former presidential political advisor. Ami, okay,
Good afternoon.
Pula-pula tayo ngayon.
Ami, anong nakalatag
Yes.
sa page 1 ng Philippine Star for tomorrow?
Kalalabas lang ngayon, joint declaration. Yung binanggit ko the other day na nakakuha ng draft yung wire agencies. Pero ngayon, mukhang hindi naman na-water down. Meron ng joint declaration ng ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and Australia. Ang sabi nila, we encourage all countries to avoid unilateral action that endanger peace, stability, and prosperity in the region. Yan. Naghihintay pa tayo ng reaction from Beijing.
So it sounds like still the same tone coming from the ASEAN,
Yeah.
no? Medyo not directing, the statement is not specifically directed at any party, whether China or the US.
Yes. Well, yan. Dagdag lang nila. We recognize the benefits of having South China Sea as a sea of peace, stability, and prosperity. So, hindi na, wala naman silang binabanggit, of course.
So, Ami, no, correct me if I'm wrong. Anyway, Ronald is here also. He might know some background
Yes.
to this. It sounds like more of the same coming from ASEAN.
Oo nga eh. Pero, nabanggit na rin natin na napag-usapan natin, China has certain friends in ASEAN and hindi united. The region has never been united dito sa disputes in the South China Sea. Everyone is thinking of, syempre, sarili nilang national interest. And nahihirapan tayo. I think we've been trying to get stronger statements from the region, pero hindi talaga siya natutuloy.
Okay.
So ito na yung the best. Considering na host is Australia, na medyo nag-iingat din siya. Although they are also involved in certain disagreements with China, nag-iingat din sila. It's a major trading partner of Australia, China, of course.
When you say, Ami, certain China's also friends within ASEAN, we're talking here about Cambodia, for example.
Cambodia,
Laos,
yes. And yung
Myanmar.
iba, medyo hindi sila, they stay away. Ang pinakamatindi, of course, we know is Vietnam and Singapore, although hindi siya masyadong deeply involved. And Cambodia and to a certain extent, of course, Myanmar.
And Burma.
Although hindi naman siya, medyo malayo-layo na yun.
And Laos.
Pero
Laos.
Laos as well, yes. And Thailand, hindi siya masyadong nag-i-involve. If you notice, medyo trying to be, hindi naman neutral, pero parang ganyan sa statement na lumabas
Pero
na
kasi
yan.
traditionally and historically,
Nag-iingat.
ASEAN has always been very hesitant to be confrontational with any of its members eh. Parang kanya-kanya tayo, walang pakialaman kasi marami siyang miyembro na medyo controversial din.
Avoid
Yes.
issues, hard issues, political issues that will only divide us.
Ang
Parang
problema
ganun
ng
ang tradition sa ASEAN.
Ang problema ng ASEAN kasi ay unanimous ang voting dyan eh. So usually ang naabot dyan, yung least common denominator, yung pinaka hindi pinagtatalunan. No?
Hindi siya majority wins eh.
Hindi majority wins, or even 2/3, or even 3/4, katulad sa ating Chacha. No? Hindi ganun yung sukatan yan. Dapat unanimity. At dahil dyan, yung unity, nagiging yung pinaka-least controversial, yung tinatawag nating least common denominator.
Saka since its inception, remember, talagang yung principle nila is non-interference.
Kasi
Diba? In each other's affairs.
Pero sa Myanmar, nag-i-interfere sila ngayon, no?
Yeah.
Naglabas sila ng mga
Sa Myanmar.
strong,
That's strange, ano?
strong statements, strong positions, etc. So, hindi siya totally non-interventionist, no? Depende sa
Yes.
mapagkasunduan nila.
But you also
Pero
have to remember
ang sinasabi kasi nila, in the case of Myanmar, naaapektuhan yung region kasi. Sa perceptions about Myanmar na hindi natatouch nga niyang trading block.
Which is
So meron
exactly
ding national interest doon eh.
which is exactly what China is doing na hindi member ng ASEAN. Di ba? Yun yung exactly na di-disrupt yung buong region. Kaya ibig sabihin, dapat consistent with that argument, dapat yung China ay itakil na nila. At the very least, yung long overdue code of conduct. No? Dahil
Pero remember may warning din dyan sa code of conduct na yan, ha? Kasi baka daw ang maging epekto is to institutionalize the status quo, which includes the artificial islands na ginawa ng China. Yan ang isa pang problema dyan.
well, it
Sa
depends
code of conduct na titigil na sila, pero nandiyan na yan, paano na yan? Fait accompli na siya.
It depends on ano
Diba?
nilalamanin eh. Paano ang consistent din naman ang ASEAN with international law. No, yun yung isang pwedeng maging term of reference ng isang code of conduct diyan. Pero meron din mga bansa na nagulat ako, may code of conduct na bilateral. Halimbawa, nung pumunta ako sa Vietnam, I met the defense minister in 2012 para lang kumuha ng lessons sa kanila because they've been fighting China for 1,000 years, no? And in modern history, 2 beses sila pumunta sa gera, no? Pero parehas silang communist party ang gobyerno, di ba? Halos parehas sila ng political system. Nung kinausap ko sila, sabi ko, anong kanyo? How do you handle China? Sabi nila, meron kaming code of conduct. No, even especially during war. Paano in the 1970s, 1980s, nag-full-scale war sila with China. Even during the war, meron silang party-to-party lines, military-to-military lines, etc. Tapos, meron silang code of conduct para sa kanilang mga contested area sa South China Sea.
Which we don't have.
Which we don't have.
Okay. Oo.
Medyo mahirap kasi in our case na mag-code of conduct with China because we have this treaty nga, we have this security defense treaty with the US. At actually, yan ang sinasabi ng mga Chinese officials have told me, hindi lang nagpapa-quote sa akin na huwag pa isulat, na actually what they feel is they're being bullied by the Philippines acting in behalf of the United States. Yun ang sinasabi nila sa akin.
Huwag daw isulat.
Okay.
So yan ang problema.
Ronald, you mentioned yung lines of communications at several levels between China and Vietnam. Okay, I'd just like to refer to the interview of ABC News Australia with President Bongbong Marcos, and the president said in that interview that he has asked President Xi during his visit to Beijing last year for such lines of communication between them. Ito, I'll just quote from the transcript. Okay, ang tanong nung Sarah Ferguson, the interviewer, do you have a personal line to President Xi? Ang sagot ng presidente,
Yes.
not yet, I'm afraid.
Talaga.
So, bakit wala? Bakit hindi humihingi ang Pilipinas? Bakit hindi umu-okay ang presidente ng China?
I'm not sure dahil dati very close yung mga Marcos sa China. At kung mamomonitor nyo, ay madalas bumabiyahe yung Marcos family sa China.
Right.
Diba?
And everybody expected during the campaign that this
Yes,
administration
yes,
would lean heavily towards China
Yes,
again,
yes.
like its predecessor.
Yes. Tingin ko partly nakita ng President Bongbong Marcos, yung mga commitments ng China sa Pilipinas nung panahon ni Digong na very pro-China, medyo kapos, no? Medyo kapos. Kaya ang nakita niya ay lalo na nung January 6, 2023, yung kanyang state visit, parang nirehash yung mga commitment kay Digong. Medyo na-insulto siya ron na parang, tagal nila akong kaibigan, ganyan pa yung trato niyo sa akin. Tingin ko isa yun sa mga ikalawa ay yung, siyempre, popular support, no, against China or popular disapproval of China dahil dun sa from 2012 hanggang sa panahon ni Digong, nag-escalate yung kanilang island building. No? Alam mo, before kasi niyan, nung before si Xi Jinping ang naging presidente ng China, relatively peaceful ang South China Sea. Nagsimula yung claims ng 9-dash line, 11-dash line pa yan, noong 1952.
Okay.
Pero kahit may ganung 9-dash line, walang away.
Okay, we're talking about Chinese aggression, okay?
Yes,
Especially
that's exactly what I'm...
during the time of President Xi. But from this interview of President Pbbm, the tone seems to be more conciliatory. I'll just pick up some quotes, there's always we will always try, and that's why the ongoing attempt is always to try and lower the temperature, ease up on the rhetoric, and communicate, and just to communicate.
Yes.
So the tonality coming from President Bongbong Marcos is medyo hinay-hinay lang siya.
Yes.
Okay? And he's asking for a line with President Xi. Bakit ayaw ibigay ng presidente ng China? So it seems to me kasi na hindi yung presidente natin ang may tampo, kundi yung presidente ng China ang mas hardline.
Well, partly because of our victory in UNCLOS, na member din ng China. It's a slap on their faces, no? So, mahirap nang tanggalin yan. Ikalawa, yung alliance natin with the West, especially the US, lalo na itong EDCA. Para sa China kasi, game changer itong EDCA. Dahil ang tingin nila, hindi sila takot sa atin. Mas delikado sila doon sa mas militarily superior US. Lalo na in alliance with India, with Japan, with Korea, and Australia. So doon sila ang kinukuha nila ay hindi umatras sa rhetoric. Ang hinihingi nila, umatras tayo doon sa ating mga ka-coalition, doon sa ating mga military exercises, doon sa ating EDCA.
The granting of 4 additional EDCA sites was probably a very sore point for President Xi.
Definitely. Okay. No? Dahil yung mga military exercises kasabay niyan are the biggest in history. No? And ngayon lang nangyari na ganyang karaming
At the same time, the sentiment of the president, eto bago lang, he said this in Australia, the quote is, ease up on the rhetoric and lower the temperature. But we're not seeing that on the ground.
Ang problema diyan kasi, Patrick, on the ground, halimbawa, this is the worst confrontation sa supply.
Ito nangyari recently.
Yung may injuries na, di ba? Kaya very dangerous yan, dahil banggaan no? Kaya nga ang sabi ng Navy at Coast Guard, this is the worst so far. No? Ang problema mo, kung magto-tone down...
Banggaan na ng 2 Navy ship, Coast Guard ships, at saka may 4 na Navy personnel na nasugatan.
Pwede ka kasi mag-tone down.
Nabubog.
Pwede ka mag-tone down sa taas Pero pagdating sa baba, may ganyan nangyayari. Ang hirap i-compromise, di ba? Yung pag-tone down. No? Lalo na kung dumadami ang injuries. Lalo na kung merong casualties. Yun ang delikado.
Okay, I'd just like to pick out another quote from that interview lang, Ami.
Yes.
Because the potential for this is the president speaking in that interview, because the potential for outright conflict is much higher now than it was before. And we worry in the Philippines because it could come from not a strategic decision that we are going to war, but just by making some servicemen making a mistake or some action that's misunderstood.
Yeah.
Parang ito yung sinasabi lang, we might be sleepwalking into war.
Yeah.
Diba?
Pero
Parang di
Patrick,
sinasadya.
yung pang interview, sinabi before or after? Nangyari ba siya before or after the incident, the latest incident?
Mukhang
Yun yung
before.
nililinaw ko lang.
Mukhang before.
Mukhang
Before.
that
Before,
part,
di ba?
Ami, we're
Kasi
not
medyo
so
nalilito
sure.
ko dun sa
We're not
oras
so sure, Ami,
namin
about
sa
that.
Australia.
Yeah.
Kasi parang he did not address the incident during the interview. Otherwise, kung aware siya, I think he might have mentioned something about it.
Nonetheless,
At baka medyo nag-iba, ng konti yung
Ang problema
statement
dyan,
niya.
Patrick, kasi ay ang toning down dyan ng rhetoric ay dapat kasabay ng toning down ng actions.
Okay.
Hindi na, every
Yes.
month kasi, nagpapadala tayo ng supply ship sa BRP Sierra Madre. Kung wala yung supply ship na yan, mawawala yung mga, walang kakainin yung mga sundalo.
Well,
ang problema, with the salami strategy, with the cabbage strategy, haharangan ka talaga, sasakalin ka talaga.
Explain the cabbage strategy.
Yung cabbage strategy ay swarming yan eh. Isa-swarm mo yung mga contested
This is a Chinese strategy in the West Philippine Sea.
Isa-swarm mo yung contested islands ng several layers, parang cabbage. Yung una ay fishing vessels ng China na armed. Kalawa, mga militia na fishing vessels na armed. Yung Coast Guard na under ng People's Liberation Army na armed. At yung Navy na meron ng mga ballistic. Sabi nga nila, may nuclear component. So, may 4 na layers, no? At sa swarm mo yan, sasaran mo hanggang mawala ng oxygen, kusa nang umalis. Tapos
Parang repolyo. Several layers.
Yes. Tapos, diyan ka lang magtatayo ng mga artificial islands mo. Dahil shoal yan eh. Mababaw.
Yung ayungin. We're talking about ayungin shoal.
Madaling magtayo. Ngayon, ginagawa nila ngayon sa Scarborough. For the first time, merong mga Navy vessels. Dati kasi Coast Guard lang yan, tsaka militia eh. For the first time, no, a few weeks back, meron na. So may scaling up. Yung isang strategy dyan, yung tinatawag na salami strategy. No? Parang cabbage din. Pero dito kasi, nagtatayo ka ng presence mo by increments. Ibig sabihin by increments, unti-unti, tapos yung katapat mo, hindi masyadong papansinin dahil you're the biggest navy in the world, tsaka konti-konti naman yung pagtayo mo, medyo hindi masyadong nagiging contested. Pero, after a while, kita mo, isang buong isla na pala na nagsimula. Ang tawag naman doon, salami strategy, or ang tawag nila doon ay ang small stick strategy. Yung big stick kasi yung invasion talaga eh. Yung small stick by increments.
Ito yung tinatawag din nilang gray zone strategy. I mean, I guess it's part of the larger gray zone strategy na.
So ang problema...
Parang aggressive action below the threshold of actual war.
Yes. Ang problema, paano tayo magto-tone down? Nagdadala lang naman tayo ng pagkain tsaka supplies. Ang gusto nila, itigil yon. Ibig sabihin, pag tinigil yon, wala na yung iyong BRP Sierra Madre.
Parang sabi ng China, ayaw kontra sila dun sa construction materials. Hindi sa pagkain. Kasi suspicion nila, baka tayo nagtatayo ng permanent structure dun sa...
Definitely, wala naman eh. Kitang-kita ng satellite yan eh. Tsaka ng mga drones kung may ginagawa eh. Isang nabubulok na barko.
Pero actually, may ganung usapan na we might set up a more permanent structure. Dahil lang naman naaawa na daw tayo sa mga sundalo natin sa Sierra Madre. Baka daw i-improve. So hindi natin alam kung what improvements might entail. Kasi kinakalawang na yung barko at baka daw i-improve yung installation doon. That's a military installation. That's a Navy installation.
Baka matetanus na kasi yung mga sundalo natin eh.
Nagsalita din ng US ngayon, i-reiterate nila na under the MDTs, alam niyo, yung mga ganyang strategy ng China, I think they are also aware of the terms of our defense treaty, our defense alliance with the US, na they are committed at inulit na naman ng US ngayon that under their mutual defense treaty with us, they are committed to defend Philippine Armed Forces, public vessels, or aircraft, including those of the Coast Guard, from armed attack. So, hindi pa naman armed yung water cannon. So, pero, yun lang ang iniiwasan din ng China. I'm sure they are aware of it.
Water cannon pala, pero may nasugatan na. Kwento nga kanina ni Ronald, it's already a gray area.
Paano kung may mamatay sa water cannon?
Pero to China, I don't think that makes much of a difference. They've done that already to Vietnam before, and may nasugatan na sa Vietnamese before with the water cannoning. Nabasag din ng windscreen ng barko nila at nasugatan yung mga... and it doesn't matter to them. I can imagine why Xi Jinping does not want a hotline, because if you were Xi, why would I want to be bothered by complaints when we have the upper hand?
Baka maista. Alam mo ba, dagdag lang doon sa Vietnam, no? Nung sa Cam Bay, no, more than 80 Navy, Vietnamese Navy ang pinatay. Talagang niratrat talaga, no? Yun yung
Ang difference, wala silang mutual defense treaty with the US.
Yes.
Wala pa. Ngayon medyo may kaunting nabubuong treaty between Vietnam and the US.
Hindi kaya
at walang commitment nga na under armed attack. Sasagot ang US.
Hindi kaya, Ronald, by design to that the president is talking about lowering the rhetoric or easing up on the rhetoric, while your Navy and your Coast Guard is pursuing more, let's say, aggressive action or pushback against China. Hindi kaya strategy to na parang carrot and stick
Ang pala kasi hindi ko nakikita na aggressive yung ating Coast Guard sa pag-supply ng ayungin. parang malabo na maging aggression yun. It's basically a small fish, a small vessel na pupunta para i-resupply.
But
Once a month.
But they're not easing up on the rhetoric. The Coast Guard and the Navy.
Iba ngayon yung rhetoric. Yung rhetoric, presidente ang crucial dyan. Pwede naman yung sabihin, tone down sa rhetoric. Pero yung ayaw ng China is the supply. Yun ang nakikita nilang rhetoric. No? They don't care. Sabi nga ni Ed, they don't care about the rhetoric. No? Ang mahalaga sa kanila is, tatanggalin ba natin yung BRP Sierra Madre o hindi? Di ba? Yun ang sinabi nila. May presidente kayo na sinabi, oral, na yan ay tatanggalin. No? Wala namang umamin na presidente.
But do we know sinong presidente?
Wala nang umamin eh.
Pero Ronald, yung kahit deny yung mga
Pero
resupply
panahon ni
mission
Erap
na yan,
to sinadsad,
yung
panahon ni
bago
Erap
nating
inatras
strategy
si
is to
Scarborough.
put the spotlight on the activity itself at the reaction of China. Yon ang bago ngayon na wala dati.
Yeah.
Di ba? In fact, yan ang some foreign governments na kakampi natin, napansin na nila yan. At sinabi nila, mabuti that we are shining the spotlight on these activities. Nababantayan siya eh. So ito medyo, yan ang isa sa kinaiinisan din ng Beijing ngayon.
Yes.
Na bawat galaw nila ngayon against us in a benign resupply activity, lumalabas ngayon. At sinasabi nila na amplify all over the world. Naiinis sila doon.
May isang dating government official na pumunta ng China. Ang sabi niya, we cannot fight you in 10 years. We cannot fight you in 20 years. We cannot even fight you in 50 years. You're the biggest navy in the world. But there is something we can do to you. We can make you look bad to the world. No, doon magagaling ang mga Pilipino. At ito yung ginagawa natin ngayon political judo.
Yes.
Hindi natin kayang lamanan sila militarily, pero we can make you look bad, no? Yan naman yung ating David versus Goliath na slingshot. Yan ngayon yung ating political judo. You will use your own strength against you.
Okay, to Ed's point, it doesn't seem like China cares. If they look bad to a Western public.
Ang sabi nga ni Ami, doon sila ngayon nagagalit. Paano alam naman nila wala tayong military capacity no? Kaya nga water cannon lang ang pantapat sa atin Di ba? Pero yung image nila sa mundo, medyo masakit 'yon. Medyo masakit, no? Yun yung
okay.
Kahit pa paano sensitive din ang China to international opinion, right?
Yes.
The trade wars, alam nila they are dependent on the world. Well, the global economy is interdependent, and the Chinese economy is heavily dependent, especially on the US economy. Intertwined dyan So sensitive din sila actually sa international opinion, at nasisira nga sila dito sa nangyayari ngayon sa China Sea, sa South China Sea.
Okay.
Dahil sa atin.
Last point na lang. Halimbawa, Ami, no, yung Walmart framework. Yung Walmart for a long time dependent sa China for their cheap products na ibinebenta sa US. Ngayon, because of what's happening, nagda-diversify na sila. They have substantially moved out of China. Pumunta sila sa India, sa Vietnam, sa Bangladesh, sa Sri Lanka, at saka sa Thailand.
Why not the Philippines? If they really want to help, we're the allies, diba?
Well, kailangan mo i-suggest yan sa Shoemart. Sa Shoemart. No? Paano yung bulk ng produkto ng ating malls galing sa China.
Di ba na-liberalize na yung retail natin and all that?
Tingin ko yung Vietnam at saka India ang pwedeng maging area of diversification.
Okay. But to your point a while ago, before we went on air, Ronald was mentioning it's not particularly good time as far as the U.S. is concerned right now.
Yes, they're stretched.
They're stretched. So they might not be around when push comes to shove.
Well, they still have the biggest navy in the Pacific.
Yes, but they're stretched. They're stretched. And can you explain that? How stretched are they?
Since more than a decade ago, noong panahon ni Obama, nag-create sila ng tinatawag na Asia pivot. They're moving away from the Middle East. Dito sila papunta. Dahil alam nila, the hub of the world is now here in Asia. Dito nangyayari everything. Trade,
booming economies.
etc. So dito technology, etc. So they're moving away. Ang problema, bumalik sila sa Middle East at nagkaroon ng gera sa Ukraine, no? So, at may problema sila internally, yung tribal battle between the Democrats and the Republicans. Halimbawa, $60 billion in aid sa Ukraine, natigil, no? For now. Tapos meron silang election sa November. Kung mananalo si Trump, mababago yung mundo. So, yun yung problema ng US. Hindi lang sila stretched too thinly, no? Na wala yung Ukraine, wala yung Gaza before, no? Kung hindi, meron silang scaling up of divisions within the US.
So, Ronald, to localize on the context of that, of what you're saying is that the Philippines is coming under increasing tension with China at a time when the US, its ally, its big brother, is preoccupied with what's happening in Ukraine, in the Middle East, in Israel with Hamas, and also with local elections.
Which can also
It's a bad time for us.
Yes and no. It can also be good dahil hindi na tayo totally dependent sa US, no? Halimbawa, ngayon meron tayong treaty with Japan, with South Korea, no? Meron tayong yung pinaka-advanced nating weaponry galing sa India, no? Yung mga missiles, etc. Meron tayong ngayong scaling up with Australia. Ibig sabihin, yung panahon ng Cold War na totally dependent tayo sa Amerika, medyo malaki na yung nabawas. Which is also good, no? Para hindi lang tayo dependent sa isang bansa, no? Yun naman yung positive. Dahil ngayon, yung buong mundo yung kinakabahan sa China eh. Dahil yung freedom of navigation in the busiest sea lane in the world, tatamaan yung buong mundo eh. Kaya dun concerned sila dun sa 9 dust line, no? Because of their own trade concerns. Kaya yun naman yung isang positive, no, dito. Pero wag natin kalimutan, the biggest navy in the world ay nandun sa Pacific, no? Kaya kung magkakaroon halimbawa ng gulong sa Hawaii, no?
Okay.
Yung kaya last week nagkaroon tayo ng attention dun sa Benham Rice, di ba, yung Philippine Rice. Dahil yan yung magiging daanan papunta sa yung strait between Batanes and Taiwan, no? Yan yung dadaanan. Kaya concerned ang China diyan eh, no? Pine-prepare nila militarily yung mapping nung seabed. Dahil alam nila, diyan sila delikado. Kung sakaling magkaroon ng conflict sa Taiwan o sa South China Sea.
Pero treaties aside, would any of these countries really come to our aid? Physical aid, not just selling us arms. Would they really come to our aid in case of any sort of conflict with China? Yeah, of course, we have MDT with the US. Pero
Japan, Australia.
if you were China, you won't go to all-out war with the Philippines.
Definitely. Definitely.
So in the end,
ang problema lang kasi dyan, nagbago yung China nung panahon ni Xi Jinping. Dahil nung panahon ni Deng Xiaoping, Hu Jintao, Jiang Zemin, ang dominant foreign policy is the foreign policy of Zhou Enlai. Ano yung foreign policy na yan? Let's strengthen ourselves but let us not compete with the US as a superpower. Yun yung Zhou Enlai. Nung dumating si Xi Jinping, dyan na nangyari yung tinatawag na wolf diplomacy. No? Kaya na natin mag-compete sa US as a superpower. So medyo nagbago.
Pero yung wolf diplomacy na mga problema din yan ngayon. Because China's having economic problems right now.
Yes.
Malaki ang nawawala sa kanilang investors. They're leaving dahil nga sa, a lot of factors.
Yes.
And at the same time, China is now dealing with a labor problem. They have an aging population. At yung mga, tumaas na yung kanilang yung standard of living nila. Tumataas na rin ang wages nila. Maraming nawawala sa kanila. And because of all this tension nga about espionage, industrial espionage na ginagamit nila yung mga kumpanya nila, maraming nawawala sa kanila ngayon na businesses overseas.
Yes. Kaya
At nabanggit mo na may mga umaalis, even with the US, medyo humihina na yung kanilang economic ties. So, hindi rin tayo pwedeng, Digong kept saying, former President Duterte kept saying, di naman tayo gigirahin ng mga yan. Sinasabi niya na we cannot afford to go to war, pero at the same time, kinakaibigan niya yung panahon na yun. Pero ngayon, iisipin din natin, kaya ba ng China to go into armed conflict considering all the stakes involved also? At kaya ba niyang pondohan? Napakamahal magyera ngayon, armed conflict. Kahit yung maliit-liit lang. So we have to consider that also.
Ang problema lang, Ami, because of all these internal problems, naghahanap sila ngayon ng external enemy. Kumbaga, para ma-divert yung mga disenchantment sa loob. Kailangan nila ng
Distraction.
isang bagong nationalism. Parang to bind the state together, not disunite it. Kailangan nila ng kalaban. At nakita natin halimbawa to sa Russia. Nag-boom yung economy ng Russia in spite of the sanctions dahil nag-boom yung kanilang military-industrial complex because of the war in Ukraine. Inaasahan ng US magko-collapse ang Russia internally because of the war eh. Medyo naka-survive sila at baka merong ang
Eh, may oil and
improvement.
gas yun eh.
Oo,
May oil and gas yun and they
Yeah.
control supply
At
lines.
binibili ng India na alay ng US
Yeah.
ng mura.
Yes.
No? Kaya yun din yung isang problema sa China. Yung Xi Jinping framework or strategy is to create an enemy big enough para yung disenchantment at division sa loob because of the problems na sinabi mo. Problems in demographics, real estate bubble, na
Lahat-lahat
sumabog,
na.
local banks bubble, etc. So, kailangan mo mag-create ng enemy outside. Yun yung delikado. Ang tawag nila dito, the new Chinese nationalism. No?
Okay.
One more kung if push comes to shove, magkagulo between China and Taiwan or China and the Philippines, sino mas tutulungan ng US?
Magkagulo na.
Magkarambulan tayo
Hindi,
with China or Taiwan with China. Sinong mas bibigyan ng atensyon ng US?
Kung sabay?
Oh.
Well, syempre,
Aminin mo.
Bibigyan
You
nila.
were once a political affairs advisor to the president, so...
Mas bibigyan nila ng tulong Taiwan.
Yeah.
Pero huwag mong kalimutan, it's just 100 kilometers away.
Yeah, that's true.
No, ibig sabihin,
Yeah.
hindi naman sila pwedeng, dito lang kami. Ang lapit-lapit.
No, but why Taiwan? There, just for the heck, for those watching and listening, bakit Taiwan ang priority?
Priority talaga. Katagal priority.
Titingnan mo naman yung aid sa Taiwan kumpara sa aid sa Pilipinas.
Oo nga eh.
No, so why is in the
eh, no?
scheme of things, why is
Same
Taiwan
with Israel.
more important, more strategic to U.S. national
Tama yung
interests?
sinabi ni Juan, ni Ed. Halimbawa, bakit mas importante ang Israel kaysa sa buong Middle East? No? Doon sila naka-invest eh.
Yeah. So why?
Naka-invest.
In the case of Taiwan,
Well, partly dahil iconic yan. No? Yan yung kanilang pangtapat sa mainland China.
well, I think I have an answer to that,
Yeah,
and it
yeah.
has to do with Taiwan produces majority of not
The chips.
Semiconductors.
semiconductors,
We're
microchips.
not talking about potato
The,
chips.
the entire world depends on
Yun ay-
microchips coming from Taiwan.
Yun
I
yung-
don't know what we have that will
We have
create
potato chips
a
and corn
disruption in the
chips.
global economy.
Meron tayong banana chips, ha? Meron tayong banana chips.
And mango chips.
Yun. Bale, yun lang talaga sagot doon, di ba po?
Trade.
Trade. It's
Yun ang
what we
sasabihin
have.
sana ikalawa eh.
What Taiwan has. So tayo, parang walang siguro yung mga nurses, deployment ng OFWs and all that.
Hindi, dati yung one.
Hindi mo, mas maraming ang magpupuntahan doon, magmamigrate.
Lalo. It might help, di ba?
Baka the cost of labor might go down pa. Anyway,
Yun ang mahirap po. That's actually, it's funny, pero mukhang malungkot, Bok, dahil mukhang yun talaga sitwasyon natin.
It's the reality.
We don't really have anything to offer except a strategic location for confronting, for allowing to allow the US to confront and contain China.
Pero, pahuli lang. For a long time kasi, hindi naman ganyan ka-aggressive ang China sa atin. From the very start, aggressive sila with Taiwan.
Right.
Dahil ang tingin nila, bahagi nila. No? Dun sa kwan. Imagine mo kung i-invade ng China ang Pilipinas. Dadami problema nila.
Bakit?
No? Anong gagawin nila sa 110 million Filipinos? No? Especially with our politicians.
Bibigyan pa ng ayuda, di ba?
Oo, baka i-take over ng ating mga politiko ang mainland China.
Well, it's also possible.
Iba naman
that,
yung ties kasi ng Taiwan sa China, no? Iba naman yun eh. Iba naman yun, even the threat is so much
Yes.
greater.
It's a province para sa kanila.
Yung threat of actual invasion.
But it's
doon.
also possible
Talagang
na,
it's always that.
but it's also possible na, the objective of a conflict is not so much to occupy a country or anything like that, but to weaken the enemy, to weaken the other side. So, in that case, you just look for a battlefield. But
Pero-
naman, historically, battles are that
Yeah.
way. Diba?
Pero-
You fight,
Pero
you choose your battlefield.
Pero in relation Taiwan, parang Crimea yan eh. Occupation talaga ang target.
Yeah.
Parang
Iba yan. Iba yan. So
Oh.
tayo, it's only, sabi nga ni Singapore Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong, do the Filipinos really want to get involved in a war where the fighting will be in the Philippines. So yun.
Yeah. Pero nagsimula
May
na kasi.
standing statement ang Beijing on Taiwan, ha? May standing statement sila that they are going to reunite one day with Taiwan and they are going to take Taiwan by force if necessary.
Right.
Yan, that's a public statement. And they
Yes.
keep repeating it.
Yes.
So mas mataas yung threat doon.
But there's
medyo iba tayo.
there's more motivation for Beijing to avoid as much as possible
Yes.
reducing Taiwan to rubble. Because it's
Yes.
they consider it's part of
Yeah.
of China.
Yeah.
The
But
Philippines,
here,
on the other hand.
the Philippines on the other hand. Di ba?
Baka mahirapan silang i-turn yung rubble ng Pilipinas. Dahil marami na tayong rubble dito.
Rubble Rouser.
Meron nga tayong son of God eh. Kung sa China yun, pinatay na yun, di ba?
Anyway, the National Task Force West Philippine Sea held a media conference this afternoon on China's latest aggression in the West Philippine Sea. National Assistant Director General Jonathan Malaya called on the Chinese government to, and we quote, match their words with actions. This is, he noted
Earlier.
that China earlier urged the Philippines to meet them halfway and effectively address maritime disputes in a peaceful manner.
So our call really is for the Chinese government to match their words with actions. Because they say they want to meet us halfway, they say they want a win-win solution, they say they want to steer a new course for Philippine and Chinese bilateral relations and resolve this matter of maritime issues in a peaceful manner. But we need to see these words translated into actions on the ground.
Actually, they don't have to do anything. They just have to dribble the ball
Pero
around.
yan yung sinasabi mong toning down.
We haven't watched the entire press conference, pero it sounds like easing up on the rhetoric.
Toning down mo.
Sir, nakinig sa presidente.
Medyo. Pero ganun pa rin. Match your words with action.
Baka
Okay.
yun din nasabihin sa atin ng China. Yun din nasasabihin nila.
Tigil nyo na yung
they keep
resupply na
saying
yan.
tayo yung nagpo-provoke sa kanila eh.
Tigil nyo na yung resupply. Binubuli nyo kami. No? Binubuli natin yung biggest navy in the world.
No, they think nga, yun ang nga sinabi nila sa akin that we are backed by the US and we are bullying them in behalf of the US. Kaya yun ang posisyon nila.
Nung nag-propose nga amin yung US na samahan yung ating resupply mission, nireject natin.
Nagpropose ang US
Oh,
naman.
oh.
When was
What do you
this?
mean?
Ronald,
That was 2 months ago.
Anong klaseng
2 months
samahan?
Ibig sabihin, ihahatid. Pupunta ang BRP Sierra Madre. Ang sabi natin, no.
Sasama ng US Navy?
Yun ang proposal nila.
This is news,
Yeah.
Ronald?
That was 2-3 months
Ako
ago.
rin, di ko yan alam.
Teka.
Ang alam ko, joint patrol lang.
As in
Yun.
i-escort
Yeah.
yung escorts natin?
Yes, tutulungan nila tayo papunta ron. No? Doon sa,
Ano yung parameters ng ano?
Hindi, wala. Dahil tinanggihan natin eh. We rejected it. Sabi namin, we will do it ourselves. Paano hindi...
So may
What
pride
was
pa rin
the
ang
offer?
Philippine
Hindi maganda kasi yung imagery. No? Na within our territory, papayagan nating i-escort yung ating supply vessel papuntang BRP.
But what
Sierra Madre.
exactly was the offer?
Nasasamahan para mag-hesitate yung Chinese Navy, no, na i-ram or i-water cannon. No? Yun yung... pero hindi na siya nagkaroon ng traction dahil nireject na natin kagad.
Can we quote you on that?
Hindi, sinabi ko lang nga ngayon.
Kasi it will surely escalate, hindi ba? It could escalate
Yeah. Kaya nga,
the environment doon sa,
Kaya nga-
especially near Ayungin.
that's why we rejected it. Malala mo, may mga senador na nag-suggest na magtayo ng permanent structures,
yeah.
ayungin. Ang sabi ng Navy, hindi na kailangan. Ang sabi ni Gibo, hindi na kailangan, di ba? Yun yung
Improve lang nga daw.
improve lang yung hindi naman ma-tetanus yung ating mga sundalo sa
Yun na nga, i-improve daw.
BRP Sierra Madre. So may mga ganung mga proposals which will definitely escalate, no? Kahit teritoryo natin 'yan. Pero nireject natin, no? Yun yung
So the US, little more detail.
Nung narinig ko ngayon, nagsalita ako praising the Coast Guard. No?
Natin.
Nagsalita ako sa several podcasts na galing-galing ng ating Coast Guard na inassert yung ating kakayanan na mag-deliver ng ating supply vessels. No? Yan yung, pinuri ko yan several times. Yung statement ng ating Coast Guard.
But how was the offer made and by whom?
Hindi ko na. Pwedeng sa next Storycon, sabihin ko. Research ko muna. Ang sinabi ko lang, narinig ko yan, kaya nilabas ko sa several interviews praising the Coast Guard for rejecting the offer.
So the offer was made to the Coast Guard, not to
The Navy.
not to the Navy or to Malacanang.
I'm not
or
sure
to,
specifically
how far
kanino,
it goes.
pero lumabas yan eh. Lumabas yan sa news, no? For one day. No? Lumabas yan. Kaya pinuri ko yung Coast Guard.
Okay.
At
That's
that time.
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oo. Lumabas sa news. Di lang
Oo nga
natin
eh.
nakita.
Oo nga eh. Saan lumabas?
That was 2-3 months ago. No? Baka dahil Pasko.
Maybe, most likely. This was after the Christmas convoy.
That was before.
Before the Christmas
Yeah.
convoy?
Eh bakit hindi na tayo
Before.
in-escort? Paano na tayo uikot?
Oo.
Ang haba-haba ng
Di ba kayo yung umikot noon? Kayo yung bumalik?
Oo.
Habang nagmimisa kayo, di ba? Bigla kayo patras. Tapang-tapang nyo. Oh.
Mamaya makita ko yung wake ng barko pa. Ba't parang kumukurba?
Lumili ko na pala yung barko.
Parang sa bridge. Kap, ano nangyari?
Ang tapang-tapang pa naman na rhetoric nyo noon, di ba? Oh.
Yan, freedom to broadcast. Freedom,
Meron kayo freedom to broadcast, di ba?
freedom to U-turn tuloy.
Freedom vote. Meron kayo freedom vote. Ha?
Anyway. Okay, naalas ka na tayo nito eh. You're watching Storycon on One News. Just need to pause for a quick break. We'll be right back.
This is the Story Conference Group or the Storycon Group. We bring you the developing news and the stories behind the headlines. Welcome back to Storycon, the Story Conference. I'm Patrick Paez with Ed Lingao.
And also with us are Ronald Llamas and Ana Marie Pamintuan of the Philippine Star. We're still talking about President Marcos's interview with ABC Australia, where his family's wealth was also questioned.
Okay.
Para maganda tayo, i-roll natin muna yun, no?
We cannot use the material.
We can use
Yes.
the material?
But maybe we can just describe what happened, or if you have some quotes from that interview.
Okay,
there's graphics ready for us. Okay.
This is with Sarah Ferguson of ABC Australia.
Okay. Bo, kaya mo basahin?
Teka, kailangan lumapit.
Okay. Okay.
Blue and
From
black.
Sarah Ferguson, this is one of a series of discussions that comes in relation
Questions.
to your father's time, which is...
Of course, the
Baka,
question
ano
of
yung book? Baka human rights pa yan eh. Hindi pa yan yung ano eh.
which
Here,
question
here.
of corruption, which became wholly associated with the Philippines
Yeah.
for a long period of time.
I think
I
contemporary
think contemporary
court
court
judgments
judgments acknowledge the atrocities that were committed, but also the plunder of the country's resources. Why wouldn't you want all of that money back in the hands of the Filipino people?
Okay,
Ang
Bok,
sagot
sagot.
ni BBM, well, with the narrative, natawa.
Natawa. Okay, natawa na
Tapos
lang.
ang sabi
Yeah.
naman ng
Ang
Yeah,
interview
yeah.
niya yung sagot ni
What?
Ferguson eh.
What's so funny?
I'm asking you about the plunder of your country's wealth. Why are you laughing? Or I'm just paraphrasing.
Okay.
Parang ganun. And then the
So
president...
there's an awkward moment
Yeah.
in an otherwise quite a long interview.
Yeah, here.
Okay.
May I just ask you why that
ayan.
is funny? Why what? Hindi why that.
Why that is funny?
Why that
Sagot
is funny?
ni
I'm asking you a
BBM,
question
why
about the
that,
plundering of large sums of
Sarah,
money from the
why
Filipino
that is
people.
funny? I'm asking you a question about the plundering of large sums of money from the Filipino people. Sagot ni President Marcos, no, I'm thinking that that idea maintains because I take exception to many of the assertions that have been made. Malinaw ba yung sagot na yun sa inyo?
Okay,
Hindi
medyo...
pa siya tapos eh. Meron pa yung patuloy eh.
Okay.
Pero
But anyway, that was those are excerpts from the interview of ABC's
Yes.
anchor Sarah
ayan, malaki
Ferguson with President Bongbong Marcos.
Yeah.
So,
I think this is I think we have since the cases were filed. Hindi the government failed. Hindi the
Yes.
government fell. So-
Cases were filed against me,
Yeah.
my family,
And
the
the government
estate,
failed.
etc. And up to now, we have the assertions that were made. We have been shown to be untrue.
okay.
Yan ang sagot niya.
Okay. And also yung assertion ng Pangulo that, the assertions are untrue. In fact, we've signed quit claims. We've told the government that whatever money you can find, you can take.
You can take.
Meron bang tanong si Ferguson na ang tawag niya Presidential Commission. Ang
Yeah.
refer niya ay
PCGG.
PCGG na may na-recover na 5 billion pesos worth ng plunder. And ang sabi ng PCGG, meron pa na to be recovered.
5 to 6.
So parang sinasabi niya, paano walang plunder kung meron na-recover? And why there are still ongoing cases, active cases? Yun yung isang sinabi ni Ferguson doon sa interview.
Okay.
But ako lang kasi, I think what's interesting is that the president was saying that they've issued quit claims that whatever government can find, that government can keep. But that's not exactly true. Because for 2 decades, the Marcos family has been fighting for
Yes.
control of a lot of these monies.
Hanggang ngayon.
Hindi siya kung ano mahanap nyo,
Hanggang
yun na.
ngayon.
They've been fighting for it. The biggest was yung Swiss bank accounts in 2003.
Swiss bank accounts.
They finally lost
Yes.
control of that, but they fought for control of that money for 17 years. I'm not talking about just
And in
anybody.
fact, that's a landmark for
Yeah.
Switzerland. Ha?
Yeah.
Sinasabi yan sa akin ng mga Swiss authorities. First time daw sila na nagganon. Na inilabas siyang ganyang klaseng ill-gotten wealth.
And the president
First time.
cannot claim ignorance of this because he was one of those who testified in the Sandigan Bayan about this case. Also, Imelda Marcos also fought for control of that money. In fact, at a certain point, Imelda was telling the court, I own 90% of that. The children don't own most of it.
Yes.
Ginanon na ni Imelda at one point. So it's not exactly true that na bumitaw sila na inyo na lahat na makita ninyo.
Saka sinabi rin ni President Marcos dun sa interview, sabi niya, everything was taken from us in Hawaii. Isa pa rin yun
Well,
ang
yeah,
sinabi niya.
Well,
We have nothing left. Wala na daw natira.
but I
Kaya
think...
saan kaya nanggaling yung well?
Oo.
Hanggang ngayon, pinag-uusapan pa yung estate tax eh.
I
So,
think
ano kaya yung basihan ng estate tax na yun?
Right. But the thing that the
Yeah.
statement about everything being taken away from them when they arrived in Hawaii, I think that was kind of true. And I think what he referred to was what he was referring to was
Yung dala nila.
mga dala nila on that
Yeah.
flight out
Which
of the
amounted to
Philippines.
several crates
Oo.
of gold, several crates of cash,
They were taken
Jewelry.
away.
and
They were
jewelry.
taken away.
Yeah.
An immense amount of resources.
Kailangan sa journalist, it is important, I suppose, for the journalist, for the interviewer of ABC Australia to ask that question, Bok, no?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But should we expect as journalists the person we're asking, or the president, no, for that matter, to actually answer that question?
Yeah, I think we should.
Yeah, dalawa kasi issue ito, Patrick.
Ang akin lang dun, Bok, there's such a thing as the right of a person to incriminate against self-incrimination.
Kaya
Even
nga,
if it's just an interview.
kaya nga-
Di ba?
But that's in court. Ako lang
No,
kasi-
but even in an interview, why do we expect a person that we will interview, for example, confess to a crime?
Because you want to ask him, this is the proof, this is the evidence, dispute it.
Yeah. Kaya nga,
If you can't,
Patrick,
then it's on you.
Kaya nga, Patrick, kaya dalawang issue ito eh. Una, yung pinag-uusapan natin kanila, yung substantial issues will continue to haunt the president and his family. Yung ikalawa, how he answered the question. Di ba? Yung, hindi na yung bago eh. Ibig sabihin, matagal na yung issue, matagal tinatanong. Dapat meron na siya nakahandang question dyan. At yan yung role ng mga presidential handlers, di ba? Yung, wag kang magfa-fumble, wag mong tatawanan, no, etc., etc. So, mas yun yung naging issue at this point eh. Na,
Yun yung nakikita mong kakulangan.
Oh, yun yung lumalabas sa
It would
TikTok
seem
eh.
like
Yeah.
it wasn't expected.
Yeah. Kaya nga sinasabi ko,
The question wasn't expected.
That was
Kaya
supposed
medyo
to be expected.
nagulat siya.
Oh.
That was supposed to be
Yeah,
expected.
yeah.
That's what you're saying.
and his handlers na dapat kasama
Should have prepped him.
Oh, pinaprep siya dyan. No? Yun yung, kung hindi, ang dami kasing issues na haharapin ng isang presidente. Lalo na yung issues na related sa iyo, na pamilya mo. No? Kaya dapat meron ka ng quick, crisp answer dyan at alam mo na paano tumakas away from the issue. Yun naman yung ikalawa na sinasabi ko, yung handling.
Right.
No? While the issue about wealth, about plunder will continue to haunt them. No? Nagulat lang ako na nag-fumble siya sa pagsagot, no? At natawa siya.
Obviously, he
Yeah.
did not expect the question to be asked.
Yeah.
I asked him that
Dapat nakinig siya kay kay ate, kay super ate. Remember Ed, you asked Senator Amy noon eh.
okay.
Some questions about their wealth,
Yeah.
diba?
Well, interesting
Remember, ang
answers.
sagot niya, paulit-ulit, nainis na nga sa'yo eh.
Yeah.
Paulit-ulit ang sagot niya.
pero alam mo,
you know, we have so many cases in court, I can't remember all of them.
Yeah.
Hindi ba?
But you know,
Parang ganun ang sagot
yeah,
niya.
but at one point she was pulling our legs. I mean, I say that in all honesty because it was also in the court records. She said, kasi I asked her the same thing I asked Bongbong in 2015. How do you explain your family's wealth? You laid claim to all these Swiss bank accounts that's way beyond the established wealth that your family could have earned legitimately. How do you explain your family's wealth? Ang sabi niya, my father was a brilliant lawyer after the war. The multinationals were getting him and paying him big bucks and all that. Sabi ko, but you know, the 2003 decision of the Supreme Court, they looked into that. They found no significant income declarations or tax payments made by Congressman and the later Senator Ferdinand Marcos Sr. As well, he did not even have a law office. That's all in the Supreme Court findings. And in 1964 December, ang asset declaration ni Ferdinand Marcos Sr. was 165,000 pesos.
Yes.
Okay.
That's also the
Kaya
Supreme Court
rin,
decision.
kaya nung natapos yung interview natin sa kanya, sabi niya, sinabi ko na nga ba, hindi ako dapat nagpunta dito sa show na to.
But you know,
But Ed, is it important for let's say the person that you're asking to actually confess or admit?
well, it's
Is it,
important.
is it necessary when, like you mentioned a while ago, the Supreme Court has already decided? Isn't that already sufficient that the Supreme Court has decided na ill-gotten wealth ito? Why do we find it necessary for the person
to ask
to
him
admit
again?
or to confess?
Because they're running for public office. And they want us to trust them. So, you want,
Pero yung
you want us to
stand
trust
nga,
you,
Ed,
then tell us the truth.
pending pa lahat yan and they don't wanna comment about it.
Yeah.
Valid ba yun
She
sa
said-
tingin mo?
she said that,
Yan ang actually yung takbo ng sabi ni
Yeah.
Senator Amy. Napakarami nun. They have about, I think, 200 cases eh.
Yeah. Actually,
Pending at hindi
I
daw
mean,
niya matandaan yung mga
that was
detalye.
her reply.
At mahirap daw mag-comment dahil it's up to the courts.
Yeah.
Tama ba? You think that's a valid argument?
That was her reply when I pointed out the Supreme Court decision na parang the Supreme Court found your father never paid any income tax to these millions that you're referring to. How do you explain that? And she says, and she goes, but you know, all these are pending in court. I cannot talk about them. And then I said,
Yes.
pero ma'am, this was decided with finality in 2003. Tapos na po yung kasong ito. Ano, hindi na po ito pending case. So it ended there. But
Kaya
anyway,
mahirap nga yung hinarap ngayon ni President Marcos in Australia. Although sabi nga ni Patrick medyo it's strange that he was surprised by the question kasi every time he goes abroad madalas siya nagpapa-interview talaga sa foreign media.
Sa foreign.
And they ask him all these hard questions. He should have been ready for it, no? Nakakagulat lang na parang nabigla siya dito sa question niya.
Okay, I guess, Ami, it's because...
He has been asked about his father's... Siguro yun ang sanay na siya, yung about the authoritarian rule of his father. Yun, sanay na siya sa question na yun.
Right.
Pero dito sa ill-gotten wealth,
in fact, he
medyo,
was asked,
medyo magulo pa.
he was asked in that interview how he restrains his authoritarian tendency. I'm paraphrasing here, no? How he finds, how he's able to restrain yung authoritarian tendency that supposedly coming from the father, as if it's something you can inherit, no? But he was able to answer that. He was able to answer that by saying that, I don't feel it in my bones, or I'm paraphrasing, but at least he was able to answer that question.
Impulses
Yeah, wala
to
siyang impulse.
authoritarianism.
in a way, it was a
sabi
funny
niya.
question kasi parang it's not something that you minamana.
Oo. That was, pero ito lang talaga sa hidden wealth, medyo he was taken aback. So he was, it's worth noting he was at a loss for words. And as Ronald has pointed out, dapat trabaho to ng
Although,
ng mga handlers to prep him on these kinds of questions.
Although baka rin kasi naging kampante. Kasi in the last 2 years,
It's not been asked. It's not
medyo
been asked.
okay sila coasting along and nobody's confronting them with
positive yung reception sa kanya.
Oo.
Maliban sa isang senador na
Oo,
nagpaplas
He should have taken the cue from the yung legislator na
Si
naglabas ng
Senator Nice.
iba dito sa Australia. Because I remember, Ami, like you mentioned a while ago, he was asked about his father. I think this was during his early trip in Switzerland for the World Economic Forum.
Yes.
He gave an interview about his father, how it was
And
like.
in New York, several interviews.
No question about hidden wealth there. in
Pero
those interviews.
Patrick, ang sabi nga ng isang journalist sa US, kung humarap siya sa Congress, na nandun sila Ocasio-Cortez, kung humarap siya sa Senate,
Asahan niya.
baka magkaroon
niya.
din, no?
Asahan niya.
Katulad sa
Oo.
Kwan, no? Iba kasi yun, no?
So dito hindi niya inasahan.
Oo. Pero similar ang political system ng Australia at US. Ang ruling party nga is Labor.
Baka naman iniisip din niya yung legal implications ng isasagot niya. Because they really have still a lot of pending cases involving ill-gotten wealth and involving members of his family. So iniisip pa rin siguro niya yan.
Ronald, my sense lang, Ami, Ed, my sense lang is parang he's really has no patience, I don't know if that's the right word, or interest when it comes to cases kasi.
Hindi lang.
Parang
Hindi siya,
he doesn't want to bother with details of legal cases.
Yung kanyang personality at saka karakter, iwas siya sa away. Iwas siya sa ganitong klaseng mga tanungan. Di ba? Gusto niya yung chill lang. No? Yung gano'n na, di ba? Umiiwas siya sa ganyan. Kaya nga, hindi siya sumama sa mga debate. No? Dahil alam niya, maraming lalabas at hindi siya pala away. Nakita mo ng 2016 debates for Vice President, nung nilampaso siya ni Alan Peter, di ba? Dahil alam niya na yung iba talagang train sa away eh. Siya, hindi siya ganun eh. Di ba? Yung personality niya, conflict averse.
Conflict averse.
Overtime averse naman tayo.
Okay.
Sorry pero overtime na lang tayo. So we
Yes.
have to go. And would like to say thank you to Ronald Llamas and Ana Marie Pamintuan of the Philippine Star. Thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank
Maraming
you.
salamat. Join us again tomorrow at 4 p.m. for the Story Conference. I'm Ed Lingao.
I'm Patrick Paez. We are One News, all sides, all the time. This is the Story Conference Group or the Storycon Group.